This lecture is called Virtue as a Necessity. And the reason I gave it that title is because virtue, ethics, morality isn't a field of study. It's a mode of being upon which all fields of study rest. It's also a mode of being on which everything you do in your life rests. The way you understand yourself or fail to, the way you understand other people or fail to, and more deeply than that, what role it is that you play in your life, in the world. One of the things I've learned, for example, being a clinical psychologist, I spent thousands of hours helping people sort out difficult problems, is that lack of virtue makes people ill. I'm not saying that my clients themselves lack virtue. I suppose some of them do and some of them don't, but to the degree that they're embedded in a network of relationships where virtue is fundamentally absent, they're tortured and tormented and they're unable to find firm ground. And that's not a biological problem, even though biologically fragile people might be hurt more by a lack of virtue. A lot of what you do in a real relationship with people, and at least to some degree a clinical relationship is supposed to be real, is provide a forum where people tell the truth. And that's hard because people don't like to tell the truth particularly. The truth is difficult. It's difficult for a variety of reasons. So when I first thought about this lecture, I had a slightly different title. The title was Virtue as an Existential Necessity. And that's a bit philosophical, so I modified it. But there was a reason for that, because the concept of virtue means to be virtuous, and existentialism is the study of being, right? And I think that you can't really understand what makes up virtue until you modulate or modify your notion of what constitutes being. This is a hard thing to do. Modern people are fundamentally materialistic. And there's some utility in that. We're masters of material transformation. And the fact that we're materialist in our scientific philosophies has made us extremely powerful, maybe too powerful for our morality, extremely powerful from a technological perspective, but it's blinded us to certain things. And I think one of the things that it's really blinded us to is the nature of our own being. Because we make the assumption that the fundamental constituent elements of reality are material, we fail to notice that the fundamental constituent elements of our own reality are not material. They're emotional, they're motivational, they're dreams, they're visions, they're relationships with other people. They're conscious, they're dependent on consciousness and self-consciousness. And we have absolutely no materialist explanation whatsoever, either for consciousness or self-consciousness. And we don't deal well from a materialistic perspective with the qualities of being. And everyone knows those qualities exist. I mean, for most people, there's nothing more real than their own pain. Right? Pain transcends rational argument in that you can't argue yourself out of it. It's just there. And materialist or not, there's very few people that are willing to allow the claim that their pain is merely an epiphenomenon of some more fundamental material process. Pain is fundamental. Consciousness is fundamental. And I think that unless you understand that, you can't think properly about virtue. So I might start the discussion of virtue with the discussion of being. Well, what does human being look like? Well, the Buddhists say life is suffering. That's the first fundamental Buddhist dictum. And I suppose a modern person would tend to think of that as a very pessimistic claim. But I've found when I've shared that information with my students, once they understand what it means, it's actually a relief, because people run around madly suffering away, and all of them inside their little shell think, well, there must be something wrong with me, because here I am suffering, and I mean, that isn't how things are supposed to be. Well, then you might say, who says that's not the way things are supposed to be? The Buddhists say life is suffering. So what that means is, if you're not suffering, that's a good thing, that's lucky, that's fortunate. That's not the way of the world. That may be something to be grateful for, ecstatic about even. And of course, in Christianity, the central symbol of Christianity is a crucifix, which is not a positive symbol in any way. It's a symbol of betrayal by friends, opposition from the state, and mortal vulnerability.